pretty soon we learned there is no way you approach too long from behind. Nose to nose was the best attack. The most scary for the B-17 pilots when they saw him coming from the nose. That was nerve-wracking, yeah, that I believe was a fact, yeah, and they spread out from their box flying very fast when we attacked from the front. Yeah. So we broke up the polks, and then 43, 44, they put the first rockets under the 109, the Focke-Wulf, and the Messerschmitt 210, 410, which were successful. They knocked quite a hole into the bomber box. One hit exploded, took two other ones down. So the losses went all at once up to 50, 60 4-engine bombers. That was questionable if they could continue this bombing rates. Yeah.
They knocked down 3 planes.
8 missions you were lucky, 10 somebody up there liked you, 25 was almost an impossibility.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
Welcome to Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry features World War II German Me-109 pilot Horst Petzschler, or for our German and European friends, PF-109 pilot Horst Petzschler. Horst flew 297 air combat missions on both the Eastern and Western fronts. He had 26 confirmed victories and was shot down 13 times. In an unfortunate twist of fate, he ended up in a Russian P.O.W. camp after the war. This is part 1 in a 2-part series featuring Horst. This is your pilot, John Sermon, asking you to strap in and sit back. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff.
I am Horst Petzschler from Berlin, Germany. My family is over 300 years in Leipzig, central Germany, in the barrel business.
An interest in aviation at a very early age.
I was able in Berlin to go to the first air shows, and there was a famous man who was always available in the air shows. That was Ernest Udet. He was a fantastic World War I fighter pilot and air acrobatic flyer. So when Udet was on the paper that he is in the show, we certainly didn't mind to walk an hour and a half. We couldn't afford a bus drive, we kids, you know, but we boys had the time. So we walked to the air base, Tempelhof, which became after the war US air base for the airlift. And that was quite a big airport in the middle of the city, which is impossible for jet traffic today. So they have other airports outside. Tegel, and then where I learned my trade in Schönefeld with Henschel aircraft, that was outside the city. That is the biggest one for all the jet traffic, and a large amount of planes take off and land there.
Building and flying gliders in the Hitler Youth.
I learned to build soaring planes, glider planes in the Hitler Youth. I joined the Hitler Youth in an early stage at 35 or so, and we had groups, sport groups, and marine groups, you know, that did boating, and we were a group of enthusiastic young people that want to fly. And of course, with the air shows that we were encouraged to be interested in, you know, we learned the government put the material up, wood and linen and the lacquer and all what's necessary to build a light plane without engine. And we brought them then, when we had them built in a year or so, we brought them to the hillside and glided down with a V-shape bungee cable, 4 men on each side, hook it up on the plane, and they run down the hill and a holding crew, 3 guys at the tail. we were shooting in the air and had this maybe 30 to 60 second flight just to keep it straight and make a perfect landing. That some guys overdid it, pulled the stick too much, and then they went sideways and cracked the plane. So we had to pull it into town again and repair. So there was more repair time often than flying time, that's for sure. And it was hard work in the beginning, these first glider flights. Then later on, when you were more advanced, you had the high performance gliders already that could stay up in the air when there was thermal uplift, you know. So we learned early about the weather conditions, about thermal, when and how, and we had always some good teachers. Since Germany was forbidden to fly motor planes, we did it without motors. And the famous place was the Rhön every year, where all the competition came to make long-distance flights. They crossed the Alps. There were names like Grönhoff, who died, by the way, in a high-altitude flight over the Bavarian Alps. And there were others, you know. And I had later on in the Air Force instructors. They were already big names in the soaring business, you know, and that was all voluntarily. We had no political training. That was it. We were not interested in politics, but we certainly were interested to have a chance to fly. And that was it. We were really not bouncing around on the streets and looking for trouble. We had something in our mind, and that was a good training for good characters, a good disciplined young men.
An apprenticeship in aircraft engineering.
In my trade, I became later, I signed up with Henschel Aircraft that built from 35, 36 planes for the Air Force. I signed up, or my father signed me up. He had to, since I was not 21 and could make my own decision, father had to co-sign. So he said, Horst, that will be hard, but you have to learn a trade, metal trade, wood trade, whatever you like. I said, I would like to go into airplane techniques. So I learned in Henschel Aircraft for 4 years, signed up a contract with the factory, the Luftwaffe the Air Ministry. They backed up all this training. In fact, Henschel alone had every year 150 apprentices as metal aircraft builders and tool makers. Yeah. Now I took both on, and that was a hard study and long hours, and not even alone that. When I came home, I want to make some spending money. I worked in an engineering office for the Air Ministry, learning to draw and develop detail prints and all that. So that gave me a big, good forward. So when I had my apprenticeship finished, my 4 years, I volunteered to the Air Force. For 12 years, I had to sign up to have the chance to be considered taken into the Air Force. That was no guarantee, yeah. Father said, Horst, think it over, you give your life away. But my father was a military man. He was in World War I, in Turkey, Dardanelles first, then Romania, Bulgaria, then 1916 in France, in Flanders, in Verdun, Douaumont, all these battlegrounds. In fact, he drove the first captured Canadian British tanks and repaired them and drove them against the others, and until we had our own tanks built. Yeah? But when it was a surprise for the German army when those tanks showed up, but they had many flaws and they were easy to capture. For instance, they took a a bunch of hand grenades and put them on the chains, blew the chains, and the crew ran away, you know. They had no more movement in these tin cans practically. So then we repaired them and had them used against them, their own tanks.
Horst's first flight in an Me-109.
Well, that was not after I had gone through the bomber school first, because I got from the AB school, from the basic flying school, a good recommendation for instrument flying. And I did never want to be a bomber pilot, but they filled the ranks. They had to deliver to the bomber school so many pilots every month for further training. And I was number 33 out of 35 that they filled in just to make the number full, you know. And I noticed what was going on. I went immediately to the commanding officer and reported that I was falsely sent over there. Oh, he said, Horst, we all want to become fighter pilots. I said, sir, this is far out of my mind. I fly anything, but I feel that I am not able to fly instruments. Instruments make me nervous. I fly over the thumb. My navigation is my thumb and my common sense. He said, well, I give you a chance. If I report what you said to Berlin, to the Air Ministry, we have a hell of an investigation coming. Is it your honest saying what you told me, and think it over? You face court-martial eventually. I said, sir, I mean it, and I don't want to be any particular. I want to fly, but I am not able to fly what's demanding in instrument flight. What I saw, that was a Heinkel 111. That bird was outdated at that time already, because I produced at Hensel in the works there the Junkers 8 already, 88, which was far advanced to the Heinkel 111. Yeah, but I made my way out of the bomber school, and with being first tested by a navigation officer from the Navy. We had good Navy guys with astronavigation and all this, and they tested us thoroughly. And the guy said, I don't know how you even made it to the pilot school. Your courses that you put in the map, they're 180 degrees off. You're not pilot material. We have to send you to a test school, and then from then you might face to go to the infantry. That's what I was told. But I know, I had the feeling, I know what I was doing. When I left that school, all my buddies had, most of them, the same feeling. They want no bomber flying. So they said, Horst, how did you do that? I had my pack, my flight pack, and I went out on the gate. I had to walk to the railway station. They didn't give me no transportation. But I made it out of that school. And I went to north of Berlin, first, of course, home, and my parents' home, visit a day or two, and then I reported to the new school. Well, the first flying there was Arado 96, a fighter trainer, and the 109, as you questioned me, that was my first flight, the 109E, which was off the frontline duty and was just used as trainer. But that was a very nervous plane, broke out easily through the torque, even it didn't have the strong engine yet. But we flew all this, and I went through that within a couple of weeks or so. The instructor said, Horst, you are good in acrobatics and you are fighter pilot material. Well, that's what I wanted. So I was sent to Paris, Villa Coublé in April 43. April in Paris, can you imagine? Was wonderful. And there was two places, Villa Coublé du Sud and du Nord. We flew always, when we took off, over the castle of Versailles, was a beautiful sight. And on the North Airport, they had already production. French industries worked for us, the Junkers 88, the Devortin fighter 520, the Frenchmen produced them for us. Yeah. So we had that already included in our production. And it didn't take long to be sent to the final training to Toulouse and Francachal and Colomiers, where they built the Airbus today in southern France. We flew through this beautiful area there to the Spanish Pyrenees, and we visited the half-over Spanish ground. There was these luxury hotels in the mountains with swimming pools. We made our slide attack and waved to the ladies because the hot mole of Europe was in Spain at that time, enjoying the war in the pool, Yeah, that was, and we flew even from Toulouse to Marseille, but we didn't have a long stay. We met the first lightnings over the Mediterranean who came in up to Marseille and turned around, They came from Algiers and Morocco, and that was when the landing there was with the American troops, and we met the first lightnings there, but we didn't get in combat. They were short of gas and we were short. So both turned to the home bases, were peaceful. September 43, I was sent to Russia, Smolensk, to Fighter Wing Mölders, and reported to the follower of Colonel Mölders, who was dead by that time. He crashed in Breslau in bad weather. He was on a flight to Berlin to be named the general of the fighter command. And on this flight he died in an accident. So Udet took over.
The flying characteristics of the Me-109.
Well, it was a pilot's aircraft if you were able to control it. You had to put your will on it from the beginning. Let it know that you are in control, If you are too soft and let go, that was it. That's what the plane was waiting for. With a heavy torque, it broke out, and you could not bring it back in line. Then you had to continue into the new direction. We had one case in Berlin where a student broke out, made a left turn 90 degrees off the runway, and went into a hangar, and there were 25 fighter planes filled up, ammunition, everything ready to take off. And we looked all the explosions that came were the bombers. There were no bombers. There was one plane that blew up 25 fighters in a hangar, in south of Berlin, Rangsdorf it was. And we never forget that. That was one mistake that a young pilot made that did cost us that much.
The defensive armor and fuel tanks of the Me-109.
We had mainly in the fighter the back armor, from head to your seat, and under the seat you had your tank, 400-gallon tank, and then you had probably a wing tank or underneath the belly, a 250-gallon. But that didn't keep us much longer than 2.5 hours in the air. But who did need it? We were in combat in no time, in 10 minutes, and then we could always refill all over Germany. There were hundreds and more stations where you could immediately refill or re-ammunition. That was already, the ground service was pretty good and fast.
Horst 1st Fighter Squadron.
Well, I remember that time pretty good, and we started. I was put right away in the first squadron with 3 other pilots. They were both farm boys, and I came as big city boy to that wing. And the commander, Colonel Nordman, by the way, he was later president of Mercedes-Benz of America in New York. He wanted me to come from Toronto maybe as bodyguard or what, but I did reject that. But in Smolensk, when I reported for duty to him, he said, have one thing straight. I like these farm boys. I don't like big city boys. Prove that I am wrong. I said, yes, sir. I flew the first mission and didn't come back because my plane was shut down. Tony Hafner, a very experienced pilot who had over 100 victories in Africa already, flew to give me the first introduction on the Eastern Front. And he made, of course, the movement against flak when we crossed the combat line. And I didn't. I flew straight. And unfortunately, I must have hit right the flak batteries that were just waiting for me. So I had to bail out 600 meters. That's 1,800 feet. That's not much room until the chute can open. But I came down and the chute was just open, but it still was a hard landing. So the first thing, I took cover in some hole, and got my pistol out, but some explosion occurred and I was knocked out again. And when they found me, I was still not quite through, but I had a blow to my head again. So these guys from a tank crew that picked me up, that this was not quite a tank, it was a armored transport. And they were from the 3rd SS Panzer Division. So they said later, well, we thought you were a Russian pilot. Pardon me. And well, they gave me some Hennessy cognac, and I woke up in that vehicle, and that was a pretty rough ride back. It was Duchovchina, Jarcevo, between Smolensk and Moscow, and there was no real highway. That was through the swamps, all large trees cut and put side by side to make a kind of a way to bring vehicles over. That was a very rough ride. But I woke up, and as I said, they inhaled, they gave me something to inhale. It was a good Hennessy cognac. So they brought me to my base to Smolensk and turned me over. And all the words my commanding officer had, well, you go to the infantry now. You had enough flying time? I said, no, sir, I fly again. But you got to give me a better horse out of the barn. And he noticed that I was not that dumb not to know that I got the oldest plane in the squadron. Well, every pilot held on to their own plane, what they were assigned. And I was a newcomer, so they gave me not the best. That's the way it went, yeah. And I bet that was in the U.S. Air Force and the Royal Air Force the same, yeah.
Flying close air support mission.
Yeah, that was Smolensk, and we were mostly used then as fighter bombers to stop the onslaught of the Russian tanks. They were coming and coming and coming and breaking through our lines, 20, 30 miles open the front line. That was hard to stop them. So they tried with the Air Force as the only help. The infantry and army had not enough anti-tank weapons to stop them. Yeah? So we were put up to fight that onslaught of the tanks. And that continues to the end of the war. They built tanks, the T-34, and then later they had the delivery Lend-Lease Sherman tanks. Yeah, they went in from Tehran or Murmansk, Arkhangelsk by convoy. That was a hard way to fight these numbers.
The munitions used for bombing tanks.
Well, we could not go low down like Colonel Rudel, the specialist for tanks. We had ammunition bombs, 250 and 500 kilo, depending on the runway that was available. Most of the time we had no concrete runway, so we couldn't take 500 kilo. We could only take on grass strips 250. That was already hard on the undercarriage. But they were drop weapons, open up containers, and the 500 had 10 kilo bombs and the other 250 smaller ones, you know, and quite a bunch like the anti-personnel bombs today, yeah, which spread the whole carpet. So that was from higher altitude, we dropped our bombs and immediately had to guard our Stukas. They were the ones that really finished the tanks. They had a 3.7 cannon, and that was deadly. Yeah. But armor-piercing ammunition was also expensive, so they had to make sure they hit and not waste their ammunition. But we were steady, as you see on this picture that I have in the album there. We were steady covering Colonel Rudel and his group, who was a fantastic flyer and a good sportsman, while the other one were boozing the pilots of his group. He was drinking his buttermilk. Yeah, that was Colonel Rudel. But he was, as only flyer, honored with the highest model, the golden oak leaves and diamonds. That was a one-time given decoration to any man. And he ended up in Argentina, celebrated by Perón. You know, they just were admiring him. And after he had his amputation, a leg and a half he lost, I think, he still was climbing the highest mountains in Argentina.
The aerial victories.
That was within between. That was actually, I dropped my bomb. I did protect Rudel and his men, and then in between there was some interference of Russian fighters. I think it was the Jak 3 or Jak 5. I have it in my list there. You can have that list. And that was in between. I had 3 air victories beside 126 fighter-bomber missions. So you can imagine we flew 5-6 missions a day. And in between, if we could get some fighter or the Ilyushin, which we called the cement bombers, they were very hard to shoot down, flew very low. You had to fly lower to get hit him in the oil tank. That was a wonderful place in the IL-2. Yeah. But otherwise, they were the horror for the German army, the Sturmovik, they called them.
Horst pilot training curriculum.
Well, we were not trained in ground combat so much. We were mostly flying in school, and that continues when I trained later on bomber pilots into fighter pilots. That was half a year of reconciliation, where I didn't go to a ski vacation. I preferred to be an instructor for bomber pilots. That was a nerve-wracking situation. That was 44 in Liegnitz, when they needed badly fighter pilots, and I had that job. But in school, we had mostly formation flying, and that meant that you were very movable. Yeah. And yet, the Allied flew also the 4-finger flight, you know, in the flight of 4. So they were as movable then as we. But Colonel Müllers was actually the one that developed that 4-finger flight in Spain. Yeah? He was later on blamed for bombing Gardena in Spain in the Civil War. He never dropped the bomb. He was a fighter pilot, you know. But they want to discredit him, but he was a brilliant leader, and they called him Father Müllers, Puppy Müllers, you know. Yeah. Only I came to the wing when already a new commander was there. That was Colonel Nordman.
How the lack of fuel affected flight training time.
The rations to the schools were shorter, you know, and you couldn't give them so much training time. We were reduced to 25 hours for a fighter pilot to start flying in the light sports plane and then put them as soon as possible on a fighter. All you have to do, take off, shoot a bomber down, and even if you don't come back, you had a success. That was the talk, you know.
his first mission against B-17.
When we met the first 200 B-17s over Guyancourt, when they bombed our radar center there, the first, I think, they flew and bombed the submarine base on the coast Brest or so, and then they came to Guyancourt, where we had hundreds of girls training in radar techniques and so, and radio operation. And then they came to Paris to make a propaganda flight like the Jenks are here, you know. And we were 8 students, actually 7 students and 1 experienced fighter pilot. Master Sergeant Immel, who was an Austrian, he shot 1 B-17 out of the 200, and we 7 went all on this one to finish them off. From Paris to Orléans, south of Paris, there were 10 parachutes. We counted them. One by one they came out, and the B-17 was still flying, wiggling a little bit. And then when the last one was out, I guess the autopilot conked out. It went on the side and went straight into the ground near Orléans Airport. We came home, and our commanding officer, just one question, how many did you shoot down? I said, none, sir, but I think I hit him very hard. We started firing from 1,000 yards away. You couldn't hit one little bit, you know. Well, we had no practice in area shooting, and I guess the B-17 crews were also not too experienced. So we had no losses. We had that 1 B-17 shot down by an experienced pilot, and 199 flew home to England. Yeah.
A lack of tactical training in attacking bombers yields low success.
In the beginning, we were attacking from behind. And in fact, our first flight from Paris, Villacoublay, when we saw the bombers, we attacked from the side, from the front, from behind. And that was an upside down, you know, from every way we could. But we shot from far too far away. Yeah, yeah, we were never trained for distance and so. That came later. Yeah. Now in Toulouse, then we had a little bit more gun training from a guy, Major Graf, who was more familiar what we needed, and we got the idea to get closer to be successful. Yeah? But you can shoot a B-17 down from 1,000 yards away. And then our weapons, the Focke-Wulf 190 in Paris, that we flew in training, had only 2 2-centimeter guns and 2 13 millimeter. Later on, we had a 3-centimeter gun in the 109 and 2 wing guns, 2 centimeter and 2 13 millimeter. That was sometimes the gondola weapons, we called them under 109, that flew like a piano, you know. Nobody likes the gondola weapons. You slipped into a spin easy.
Learning from mistakes. The frontal attack works best.
Pretty soon we learned there is no way you approach too long from behind. Nose to nose was the best attack. The most scary for the B-17 pilots when they saw him coming from the nose. That was nerve-wracking, yeah, that I believe was a fact. Yeah, and they spread out from their box flying very fast when we attacked from the front. Yeah. So we broke up the polks, and then 43, 44, they put the first rockets under the 109, the Focke-Wulf, and the Messerschmitt 210, 410, which were successful. They knocked quite a hole into the bomber box. One hit exploded, took 2 other ones down. So the losses went all at once up to 50, 60 4-engine bombers. That was questionable if they could continue this bombing rates, yeah, like the rates of the ball bearing factories and Central Germany industries. So they were painful for the 8th Air Force. And of course then they had to come out with some solution, and that was the escort with the P-51, which was very wise to attack us in our takeoff places. We didn't have that much fuel. We didn't have auxiliary tanks at that time.
Wave attacks by squadrons. No solo attacks.
We were spread out. We were a squadron and more squadrons on the side. There was a front of maybe 5 to 10 miles, you know. But wherever you looked, you saw the 4-engine bombers on the sky. There was nothing room left on the horizon, you know. That was all full. I had to stay in formation and had to go straight, not to interfere with the other attacking.
More tactics. Spread the formations out and use rockets.
The point one was spread them out, you know, to attack them easier. Yeah? And the rocket starting firing into the bomber box was an answer to it. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough carrier for heavy rockets, and in the beginning, like everything has a baby sickness. So the rockets did not function right well to begin with. And I must say, beyond all our knowledge, Henschel was surprisingly, my aircraft factory was surprisingly working on all kinds of rockets.
Horst P-17 attacks always passed over, not under the formation.
Never under, in case they dropped their bombs in emergency, and the debris that was coming from these planes, or they throw off certain canopies or what, just an emergency, and that debris all fall down, not up. So I pulled up over the bomber stream. Yeah? When you saw the sky full of debris fluttering all over, you know, that automatically forbid you to dive under. Yeah? There was only one way up in the free blue yonder if you had the power and your engine gave it. Yeah?
A loss of seasoned pilots drains resources from the Russian front.
Our older group of pilots slowly was reduced. Yeah? You lost a few aces, Gabreski and the other one. It doesn't matter. These pilots were missing in the training and the leading on both sides. Yeah? But we couldn't replace that fast, so we had to empty the Eastern Front and bring good pilots from there into the defense of Reich. And that was immediately the Russians felt that, and easy going, so they could push harder. Yeah. Anything that we needed over Germany to defend the country was missing on the Russian front, and that didn't bring us forward anymore.
Horst gets transferred from the Russian front to the Western front.
That was when I was transferred as a flight leader from the Russian front to, on the 14th of April, 44, from Russia. We were in Bobrisk at that time, to Berg near Magdeburg. That was in between Berlin and Magdeburg, and the whole industrial center, like Dessau and all the Leipzig area was the biggest industry of ours was. Now that attack I will never forget, as it was Sunday. Yeah, that was the 28th of May, 44, and 1,200 U.S. 8th Air Force, and from the south the 9th or 15th Air Force, and 1,200 escort fighters faced 300 fighters, night fighters, Messerschmitt 410 twin engine, over 300 we scratched together against this almighty 8th Air Force. Yeah. So you can imagine the outcome. We lost about 55 fighters and fighter bombers or night fighters, and they lost 65 B-17s, B-24s, and about the same amount of fighters. But that was quite a success anyway. Yeah. But they lamed quite a bit of refineries, aircraft engine industry in Dessau, Yonkers, and it was a success in any way, you know. And we felt that to replace it, it was nearly impossible. Yeah. Lucky enough, I remember they told us 100 Tiger tanks were just out of Magdeburg on the way to the Eastern Front. They were already on railway transportation to beef up the Eastern Front, and that was produced in Magdeburg in a big tank factory.
Worst aerial combat experience that day.
On that day, we took off, and I had on my right side a young 20-year-old corporal, Hans Hurdy. He was my right wingman, and I had two other ones, a master sergeant and a corporal on my left wing. And we were up in 10,000 feet, protecting the storm group from JG3 Udet with Oscar Bösch. And they were ready to attack the bomber groups, and they flew 24,000. Oscar was about 26,000, and we were up in 30,000. And above us, as we noticed too late, the Mustangs at least 500 feet higher. Yeah? So we were iced up on the side, couldn't see them, and yes, my wingman on the right must have had freed his plexiglass on his left side, looking towards me. So he warned me. That was his last wording. Horst Mustangs behind us. And then he was hit already and went down. And I said, notice the Mustang passing me. And I was right behind him, of course. Give him a brush, and he showed the white streak. That meant that he had to go down too. But I couldn't follow because I was hit at the same time from his wingman. He didn't have the speed and was more lining up behind me and could give me a good brush. Yeah, and I tumbled a little bit, tried to straighten out and control, but without a third of the left wing missing, I couldn't hold the plane, so I was sure I had to bail out. So I tumbled left, right a little, and I was down to about 1,800 feet. Then I decided to jump out, you know. I put the plane on the right and the rear, turned over a bit, and of course, I forgot to loosen my phone and my cap that was ripped off. That was a hard feeling, but I lost it. And I came free without hitting my rudder, which was mostly the case, and the 109 in particular, that the pilot did not have the right position to bail out and hit somehow with the back or some body part, the rudder, and were badly damaged. And, no, I came clear down. And the funny thing, I landed in an area where a B-17 crew came down. The B-17 was hit by 8.8 flak, and the lieutenant from this battery, 8.8, lined the Americans up there. There were 7 of them. 3 must have been in the plane when it cracked and exploded on impact. With full bomb load. There were details hanging in the trees. You know, that was a terrible picture. Well, I was lined up with the Americans, and I told the lieutenant, don't you see, I am on your side. Oh, pardon me. Well, I had the yellow band, Luftwaffe, which was put on us because it happened that our guys were also mistreated by farmers that were mad that they lost their properties, and so they took the pitchforks to treat them, the non-so-welcome people, you know. So we were together in a bunch, and that lieutenant asked them, I think it was the observer, the co-pilot, if they were shot down by flak or by fighters. Said, no, we were shot down by flak, by fighters. Because that guy knew red mirrors on the uniform was anti-aircraft. Yeah? So he teased that lieutenant, a young lieutenant. He didn't speak too good English, and he asked the Americans, well, why don't you speak English? Or he asked me, ask them, they don't answer me. I said, well, they are shocked, you know. They're combat shocked, you know. So they don't want to ask you. And but eventually that one guy opened up and said, tell that asshole we speak American. Yeah. I was very surprised. And then I found immediately contact to that guy. I think he was over 6 foot tall and from Chicago, that I heard. And well, we came together to my airport, back to the base. They were well treated that evening in our officers' mess. You know, I had to fly a new plane immediately. I had not the chance to talk with them. You know, so there were others. And they were told, tomorrow you will be in an interrogation camp near Frankfurt, Oberursel, which was American pilot interrogation. And here you don't have to worry, we don't question anybody. But they were with our crews together and had practically a nice evening together. But I had to fly a new plane to be ready for tomorrow morning. I was not very pleased with that. And my squadron leader, an Oberleutnant Walter Bohatsch, he was an Austrian. Well, half Austrian, half Czech. Bohatsch means that is not too German, that is Czech. Anyway, he passed away last year. But he always said, Horst, you lead the squadron. Ich kann not fliegen. I can't fly, I have hemorrhoids. Well, when you saw the numbers of bombers coming every other day, you get hemorrhoids coming, you know. So everybody in the squadron learned to have hemorrhoids. You know. They couldn't fly. Or they'd search for other sicknesses. But our squadron leader couldn't fly. That son of a gun was waiting for the 262. He had already more information about it. Said, why shall I be a victim in the 109? I have something new coming. And he finally got into a squadron to be trained on 262. You see how it was possible to, if you knew the right way to manage your future, like I managed getting out of the bomber school, yeah?
Horst's view of the Russian front air war at the time of his transfer to the Western Front.
Well, from my view, it was definitely more dangerous, you know. I mean, we had still the air superiority. Also, the Russians started to outnumber us again, but we had still the air superiority. You will see why the Russians, of course, had all kind of help. Stalin had from the French Communist organization the Normandy Yemen fighters, whom he supplied with the most modern Russian aircraft, the Yak-9, and I have a picture there. We encountered them first over Latvia when this squadron came into action, and they caused us quite a few losses. They were good pilots, you know, but that was already in the Spanish Civil War. There were even American pilots who flew for Stalin, communists, the Lincoln Brigade that flew in the Spanish Civil War. You don't hear much here because it wasn't much made public, but the Lincoln Brigade, until the Americans were so turned off being commanded by Russian officers in the International Brigade, you see. They tried to push the Americans around and said, no, we don't take that. Then they moved back to America you know. But then they were known as communist supporters, and I guess they were booked by the CIA.
The B-24 Victory.
And they were not in a big group. I think that was, they flew back from Braunschweig. That was an attack on Braunschweig airport and production center. And when they flew north of Braunschweig, I caught them. I was alone. I had no wingman, nothing. I was looking for a Mustang escort. There was nothing. So I went into a group of 4 B-24s and got me one out, you know. Just a frontal attack, and it was burning in no time, and folded the wings, and they bailed out. But I didn't know how many bailed out. I had to go down. I was short with ammunition and fuel. So I had to find a place to land. And I think I landed in an outside airport near Braunschweig.
The B-17 Victory and the German point system.
That was a big formation, and I shot them out of a formation from a big group. But still, it was not right in the middle. It was more on the outside group, you know. But they were still flying in a box formation. So it was actually a 3-point victory. They counted it as 3 points if you shut it out of a group, yeah. A single one that you finished off, that was only 1 point. So they had this point system, which was much more accurate. We had no quarter part or half, or like the American or British. They had a detail victory that was impossible, you know. Either you had a victory or you had none.
Attacking bombers with a student wingman was forbidden.
I failed to report one B-24 because they would have court-martialed me. I attacked over South Silesia in school. That was in school. I was not supposed to attack with a student, yeah, and in a territory they came from Italy with 2 B-24s and bombed a refinery in Upper Silesia. Now this, I shot out of the formation, and I couldn't finish it because my wingman busted away from me. So I had to try to catch up with my wingman. He flew home, you know. Well, a young student, you know. And the flak finished the B-24 off. So the flak got it, and I didn't say a word about it because I would have gotten as instructor. I was not supposed with a student to attack. That was it.
One of the reasons there was no German fighter opposition in the bombing of Dresden.
We were not used when the attack on Dresden was. We were very close to our airport, to the city of Dresden. And our school was not sent up to fight them. Yeah. We had about maybe 50 to 70 fighters ready there, but all bomber pilots and students, young students and bomber pilots. Now we heavily trained bomber pilots at that time. That was the only replacement we could put in fast enough. Yeah. So I had a colonel, a Oberleutnant, a captain, and even a Zeppelin operator was my student. That Zeppelin operator later on died in the northern part of Germany when he used methanol too early on a low-level flight to boost to get the Russian observer, and he exploded, you know. You were not supposed to use that booster under 10,000 feet or so, yeah. If you used it too early on the ground, that overloaded the engine and blew it up. That, you know, I mean the supercharger, where you get 10% extra power out.
No stomach for being a Third Reich officer.
We were warned in the beginning that as an officer, you have to make clear that you're ready to execute your own friend if he is accused of espionage or traitor or anything against the country, you are guilty and you are proven guilty, so you might be leading as an officer, or you might be assigned to lead a firing squad, and if it's your own friend, are you able to do that? And I said no. And for that reason only, I would have never been an officer. Yeah. But it was Hitler's order at the end of the war, 44, when you are proving that your officer's material, you will be an officer. That is an order and you cannot reject. So from then on, they put me in as a flight lieutenant, but I was never installed. The papers did not come to the Eastern Front. We didn't have enough transport to bring food or ammunition into Danzig or Königsberg and replacements. So why should they bring papers? You know, that was not important anymore. And I was never out for it. So why, you know? Of course, it would have been a little bit later on in the pension plan, it would have been an up in my reward for when I got my pension. I have finished 20 years to serve the country, and I have over 35 years here in America. So I got my pension for my service. It was 4 years at Henschel, learning a trade. It was 4 years in the Air Force and 8 years prison time. I mean, I was 4 years in Russian prison, but it counts double for your pension. And then when I came home, I was half a year in the police force, a year and a half in British European Airways as a deputy mechanic there for the airline. And I just scratched together 20 years and I made my German pension, you know.
Would you fly down the bomber stream looking for the loose formation?
No, we had no time for that. We were led by the ground station into some position. Of course, they had the better oversight and wanted us to get in without being bothered by the escort. So they waited when the escort changed. They came too late and they guided us immediately in, you know. If they figured the Mustangs or the Lightnings run out of gas at that point and the Mustangs are not there in time, then we put our fighters in there. So that was a plane, not only in the air, but in the ground also. These commando places were very important. They saw the radar screen, they had their map projected on the walls and so, and they knew exactly where the groups of escort came, so they tried to get us in, not being bothered by the escort. Yeah? It didn't always work, but sometimes it works, and then we were very successful. And then the 8th Air Force had over 10% losses, which made them doubtful if they could continue, because over 10% they could not replace in time. Yeah?
This concludes part 1 of